Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM Plus, where today I'll be looking at every Easter egg and reference in the Many Saints of Newark, a Sopranos story. The movie begins with a narration from Christopher Moltisanti, who is voiced by Michael Imperioli. He is speaking from beyond the grave because he was murdered by his mentor Tony Soprano in the final season of The Sopranos in one of the most shocking moments of the series. Christopher is often referred to as Tony's cousin, but Christopher is not a blood relative of Tony. However, Christopher is a cousin once removed from Tony's future wife, Carmela. The name of the movie, The Many Saints of Newark, refers to the characters in the film that shape many of the ones we see on The Sopranos and how the legendary status that they hold may or may not be deserved. Tony's father, Johnny Soprano, played by John Bernthal, was often remembered fondly by Tony even though he saw him do brutal things. His wife and Tony's mother, Livia, would often remind others about the legacy of her husband.
Dorothy Mantooth is a saint! Hey!
Wait, no, not that clip.
He was a saint. Anyway.
We meet Christopher's father, Dickie, who is played by Alessandro Nivola, in 1967 with a very young Tony Soprano. He refers to Tony as Gagoots, which is a term that Tony will use as a nickname for his son, AJ. We are then introduced to Dickie's father and Christopher's grandfather, Hollywood Dick Moltisanti, played by Ray Liotta. Ray Liotta was actually almost cast in The Sopranos as the character Ralph Cifaretto, but relented as he felt that taking this part along with his starring role in the movie Goodfellas would lead to him being typecast in mafia roles. His co-star Lorraine Bracco obviously did not feel the same way, as she was cast in the pivotal role of Dr. Melfi after starring in Goodfellas. Goodfellas was also the second movie role for Michael Imperioli, who played the character Spider in that film. At the dinner table, Dickie remembers his father talking to Vito Genovese, who was a real-life mob boss and was a known associate of Lucky Luciano. This may be a hint that the DeMeo crime family, which is fictional and created for The Sopranos, was not only a part of the Genovese crime network, but that its origins were bred from the relationship between Christopher's grandfather and Vito Genovese. At Tony's sister Janice's christening, we see Johnny Soprano along with a young Livia Soprano, played impeccably by Vera Farmiga. The actress has her own history with mafia films, as she was a part of a love triangle between Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon's characters in the film The Departed. Coincidentally, Tony and Christopher are listening to a song from the film's soundtrack during the accident that leads to Christopher's death. Besides Janice, who is also a major character on The Sopranos and played by Ida Turturro, other Sopranos mainstays return, such as Uncle Junior Coronado, Silvio Dante, and Salvatore Big YouTube content stripe Bompensero. I loved how we get to see the evolution of the wig that Silvio Dante wore, who was played by Steven Van Zandt, and I thought the actor who played his younger self, John Magaro, nailed that sourpuss face that he always had. The part of Tony Soprano was actually written for Steven Van Zandt in that role, but HBO wanted a more well-known actor for the lead of the series, so Mr. Van Zandt was relegated to a co-starring role. We then see the crew in the back of Satriali's pork store, one of the most used settings on The Sopranos. In the infamous back room, Dick Moltisanti is telling a story about him meeting Frank Sinatra, whose daughter Nancy would later appear on The Sopranos during the final season at a birthday party for Phil Leotardo. And when Dick breaks out into laughter at the table, I couldn't help but be reminded of this infamous scene from his other mafia film. There we also hear Junior Soprano, played very well by Corey Stoll, say this infamous line out of frustration. Corey Stoll stated in an interview that he would say this line to get into his character, and that he studied the actor who originated the part, Dominic Chianesi, before taking on the role. Speaking of relationships to mafia films, Dominic Chianesi is the only actor to have a speaking part in The Sopranos as well as a Godfather film, as he had a role in the second Godfather movie. Later, Harold McBriar, played by Leslie Odom Jr., comes to speak with Dickie and asks if he is sure he is not part African American, to which Dickie states that he is from the Napoleano part of Italy and not Sicily, which raises the tension in the room. I could not help but think that this was a reference to the famous Sicilian scene in another mafia-related movie, True Romance, a love story written by Quentin Tarantino. That scene also included a young James Gandolfini, and it is said that this part led to him being cast as Tony Soprano years later. We then see the beginnings of the 1967 Newark Riots that were sparked after the arrest and assault of John William Smith on July 12th. The riots led to 26 deaths and over 1,000 arrests, along with more than $10 million worth of damages. Still to this day, some areas of the neighborhoods that were affected have not been fully repaired. Next we see a scene that we actually saw in the Sopranos episode Down Neck, and that is the arrest of Johnny Soprano at Playland. Johnny Boy was arrested and ends up completing a sentence of 4 years in jail for assault with a deadly weapon. When Dickie kills his father, there's a dark bird trapped in the garage. The superstition is that if a black bird gets trapped in a house, that it foretells the death of a family member. Christopher notices a bird in the window while he is getting made in the 3rd season episode Fortunate Son, and he sees this as a bad omen. While things obviously do not turn out well for Christopher, this bad omen was probably meant for the other man being made at the time, Eugene Pontecorvo, who ends up killing himself after becoming an informant for the FBI in a similar basement as to this one during the show's final season. At Dick Moltisanti's funeral, Junior says the words "what a blow" to Dickie, which is similar to what an older Junior said to Tony at his mother's funeral.
What a fucking blow.
Now you too.
Dickie then goes to meet his uncle Sally Moltisanti, who is also played by Ray Liotta. This is not the first time one actor has played twin parts, as Dan Grimaldi played Philly and then Patsy Parisi throughout the run of The Sopranos. Tony is at home reading a comic based on the Ivanhoe series, which is a fictional story about the 12th century, and Dickie asks why he doesn't read more popular comic books like Superman. We learned in The Sopranos during his sessions with Dr. Melfi that Tony was always a fan of history. This story also includes Robin Hood, and later in the movie, when Tony steals an ice cream truck, he acts as Robin Hood and gives away the ice cream to children. Tony's foul-mouthed friend is a young Artie Bucco, who mentions that his father wants him to take over his restaurant Vesuvio when he gets older, which he ends up doing. Tony jokes that his father wants him to grow up and rob Artie's restaurant, and this is not far off from being the truth, as Tony is responsible for the destruction of the restaurant and then uses the new restaurant Artie opens for multiple schemes. The two kids are hanging out outside Holston's, which is where the last scene of The Sopranos occurs. Tony's two children are also present in that final scene as well. When Johnny Boy gets out of jail, he has some harsh feelings about how the neighborhood his family lives in has changed. Tony was shown to be very racist, and I believe that this film tries to show us that this was a trait that he picked up from his father. During the meal, Tony tells his dad that he will be the starting linebacker for the high school team. This is also the position that his son AJ would grow up to play. After Tony tells his father the good news, Junior responds that Tony does not have the makings of a varsity athlete, which was a phrase he said more than once on The Sopranos. After the meal, the family is sitting around the TV watching the movie Key Largo, which stars Humphrey Bogart and Edward G. Robinson. Pictures from this movie are posted on the wall in the scene in which Christopher kills Emil Kolar in the 1st season of The Sopranos. When Dickie goes to meet Harold, Tony is sitting in the back of the car with a young Jackie Aprile, who is the acting boss of the family when The Sopranos begins and whose death from stomach cancer allows Tony to take over as the street boss of the family. When Livia tells Johnny about Tony and the ice cream truck, she says that Janice found out about it from Tony Blundetto. Tony Blundetto also appeared on The Sopranos and was played by Steve Buscemi, and is another character that was killed by Tony. Mr. Buscemi would go on to play a different mob boss a few years later in the HBO series Boardwalk Empire, also appearing with Sopranos co-star Dominic Chianesi. Livia states that she thinks that her son should grow up and sell patio furniture, which is what Tony tells Dr. Melfi he would probably be doing if he were not involved in organized crime. After Livia gets all worked up, Johnny shoots a bullet through her beehive hairdo, which was an incident that an older Janice retold a couple of times on The Sopranos. When Livia is getting worked up, she mentions one of Tony's teammates, Bobby Piocosta. Jeremy Piocosta appears as a bully to AJ in the 1st season of The Sopranos, who later backs down after finding out that AJ's father is in the mafia. We see that Tony speaks to his guidance counselor at school, who seems to immediately discover the relationship between Tony's feelings and his mother. This may be a precursor to Tony's relationship with Dr. Melfi, as he discusses many of the same things with her. The counselor also relays a story to Livia about how she once read a story to Tony about Sutter's Mill and the gold rush of the 19th century. This may also be a reason why Tony has a fondness for history, since we found out that his mother reading him this story was one of his fondest memories. An attempt is made on Dickie's life, but instead of Dickie being shot, Buda Bonpensiero is killed. He is shot in the face through his eye, and this may be why his son asked for Tony, Paulie, and Silvio not to shoot him in the face before they kill him in The Sopranos. A pretty epic gunfight ensues, which was made even more memorable with the inclusion of Jon Bernthal, who's well known for playing the Marvel anti-hero The Punisher. I swear, during the scene I thought he was going to bust out the skull chest piece and take everyone out. Back in the kitchen, Tony is having lunch with his mother and starts to sing the song Mother's Little Helper while discussing his mother possibly taking an antidepressant. The song is by the Rolling Stones and is about the rise in popularity of prescribed tranquilizers among housewives and the potential hazards of overdose or addiction, and has a lot of meaning to this film and The Sopranos. Tony sings the song as a direct reference to this, and then the discussion switches to his sister Janice. Janice would grow up to be a big enough fan of the Rolling Stones to get a tattoo of the band's logo on her chest. Tony would later go on to use Prozac to help him not have panic attacks, and of course Christopher Moltisanti, the narrator of the story, would deal with addiction his whole life, as would his mother and his father. At the end of the conversation, Vera Farmiga as Livia Soprano repeats in pitch-perfect cadence one of the character's most infamous phrases.
Oh, poor you!
At the funeral for Budo Bonpensiero, in an uncredited cameo appearance, the series creator David Chase appears as Eckley DeMeo, who is the boss of the DeMeo crime family and is mentioned but never seen on The Sopranos. Mr. Chase also appeared in 3 episodes of The Sopranos in uncredited cameo roles. Outside the funeral, Junior slips and falls and once again yells out in frustration as he did on The Sopranos. Also in that scene, Tony tries to get Dickie to get him the drug Elavil for his mother to help her out. Years later, Tony's daughter M.O.D.O.K will try and get drugs from Dickie's son Christopher in the first season of The Sopranos, but for different reasons. When Dickie gives Tony the speakers, he mentions the name Hesh, who is a character that later appears as a trusted confidant of Tony throughout most of The Sopranos. When Dickie discovers that Giuseppina has cheated on him and betrayed him, he chokes her and drowns her in the ocean. When Christopher finds out that he has been betrayed by Adriana in the 5th season episode Long-Term Parking, he also strangles her before leaving and allowing Tony to take care of her by revealing to him that she is an informant for the FBI. When Tony calls Dickie and tries to get him to buy him beer, the girl standing with him is a young Carmela De Angelis, who will later become Mrs. Tony Soprano. It was revealed that a new scene was shot for the film with Edie Falco as Carmela, but in the end the scene did not make the final cut. But I do hope that it gets released one day because I love her performance as the character and believe that she is one of the most underrated actresses in TV history. When Dickie is shot, it looks as though he does not have time to realize it and blacks out, which may be a callback to how most people assume Tony Soprano also died at the end of that series. Dickie's death is referenced on The Sopranos and haunts Christopher until Tony is able to find the man that shot his father and allows Christopher the means to kill him. It has long been wondered if the man was really the person responsible for the death of Dickie Moltisanti, or if that was just another way for Tony to manipulate Christopher. The movie does not explicitly reveal if this man is the same man that Christopher kills, but does reveal that Junior Soprano ordered the hit, presumably because Junior did not like the fact that Dickie was seen as more successful than him and that he mocked Junior on multiple occasions. Junior was introduced in the first season as being ruthless and wanting to be the head boss, which is why Tony backed him for the role, a move that prevented a civil war and an early retirement for one of them. The move also allowed Tony to be the actual boss of the crew while Junior was awaiting trial, another move that Tony had always planned on. It is possible that during the time since Dickie's murder, Tony deduced that his uncle had killed Dickie and used the event to not only manipulate his son Christopher, but also manipulate Junior into taking the head boss position, knowing full well how Junior would react if his leadership was challenged. The next day, Tony is waiting at Holston's and looks out the front window, similar to the last scene of The Sopranos, where he is also looking out the window as the scene cuts out. In The Many Saints of Newark, Tony is there in the morning, which signifies the beginning of his life as an adult, while in The Sopranos he meets his end at night, signifying the end of his life. At the wake for Dickie, a picture of him in the Navy is shown, and this is supposed to be the same picture that is in Christopher's mother's house in The Sopranos. In the end narration, Christopher says that Tony is the man he went to hell for, which mirrors this line that he said on The Sopranos.
That's the guy, Adriana. My Uncle Tony. The guy I'm going to hell for.
Well, that was everything I saw, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for clicking on this video. Please hit that like button and subscribe button if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?